The whole internet seems to be bullying the US Army for dropping maybe the cringiest drone technology video I've ever seen. In this case, is the bullying warranted? Because if the Army doesn't learn to innovate faster, we are going to get absolutely smoked by China. I'm Paul, US Army combat veteran. We're going to talk about that. Plus, the Russian internet seems to be getting worse by the second. But is it actually Ukraine's doing? Let's crack into it. Okay, so this has been absolutely, the Army has been absolutely getting dunked on for this video. And that's because it dropped literally yesterday on the U.S. Army's, get this, their multinational training group, Ukraine's official Twitter account or X account. And they touted the fact that, guys, they have figured out how to drop a grenade from a drone. That's right. The U.S. Army finally innovating how to drop a grenade from a drone. And the thing is, what's also insane is that they said, listen, this was the first live ordnance drop from a small UAS, unmanned aerial system, for the conventional Army, which is insane, right? So this isn't like, oh, this is like some old tech that we're just rolling out now. No, they've said this is the cutting edge of conventional Army's drone dropped munitions. This is insane. I want you to look at this. This is not, I did not make this up. This is their actual video that they dropped. Let's take a listen, and I'm going to try to break down for you guys why this is really, really, it's not just cringe. I mean, it is cringe, but it's more than cringe because it reflects a dangerous lack of innovation in the drone munition space. So let's just take a listen.
We're out here at range 132 at Grafenwehr, and we had 10 planned drops.
Okay, so transforming in contact is a concept that's coming down from the Pentagon, where they say, listen, we have to learn to, as a force, innovate at a faster iteration cycle. We have to learn to change with the battlefield. That's why they call transforming in contact. Again, it's modeled in a lot of ways after what Ukraine has had to do. As you might recall, that in the start of the war in 2022, you saw Ukrainian forces jury-rigging conventional drones or reconnaissance drones to have a small little, basically claw that you could press a button and it would drop a grenade. And the Ukrainians became quite good at dropping those grenades into the hatches of tanks, for example. But very quickly, the Russians learned to counter them with simple, remember the cope cages, the early cages they would put over top of their tank hatches, right? Easy solutions. But the Ukrainians had to quickly innovate. Literally, it was like 90 days from the start of those videos of grenades that we started to see them already innovate, changing, refitting the grenades into more like mortar rounds that had stabilizers and were much more accurate. They also, unlike the grenades, exploded on impact instead of waiting 3 to 5 seconds, giving and bouncing and rolling around, right? The innovation cycle was very, very rapid with these. And it was only a couple of months later that you started to see the FPV munition debut. So the fact is that is the model for the Pentagon's transforming in contact. There's some key differences, though, that we're going to talk about why the U.S. Army will never be able to transform in contact in its current state.
And our first test was a success, and it was the first live ordnance drop from a small UAS.
So you can see here, the interface, by the way, guys, if you've ever used any of these conventional drones, you know that this is, well, looks like the DJI Fly app. This is a extremely standard commercial app. Not what's even more troubling is that it's actually a Chinese made. So they have a Chinese made drone that they are using here, which, as you might recall, given the fact you have to fly it on an app, means that this data is going to China.
UAS.
So not only is this the first munition drop of the U.S. military, way behind the power curve, but also we're feeding this data directly to China.
For a conventional Army, that's a big step for 7th ATC, 173rd, who we partnered with in JMPG, the unit that I'm in. So we were able to conduct the first test, very successful, and then we'll continue with follow-on tests and hopefully provide that information back.
Now, again, you may be looking to yourself, why are they using cars to drop an anti-personnel fragmentation grenade. This is a great point because even we know this is not the target. Now, I understand it doesn't really matter, right? This is just proof of concept. And that alone should also be bothering you that the U.S. Army is just now trying to prove that drone-dropped grenades kind of work.
To the Army enterprise.
The Joint Multinational Training Group, we do a lot of things. We have teams.
Right. And here's one of the things that's troubling is this is the Joint Multinational Training Group Ukraine. And what bothers me about this is that these are the guys, when we talk about the U.S. military training Ukrainian forces, these are the guys who are doing it and have been doing it. So these guys are not, this isn't like a random unit at like Fort Hood was like, oh, I think we should try to do this. And they're trying to like build it on their own. Instead, what we have here is a unit whose specialty, whose sole mission is to prepare new Ukrainian conscripts for combat. So the fact that these guys believe somehow, inexplicably, that this is the cutting edge of Ukrainian combat on the front lines is insane. It is insane to me. Literally, they could have called anyone who follows this channel. Any one of us could have told them what things are currently like. And I'm actually going to take a second because if you want to know what the actual fighting looks like in the actual front lines, you want to become a member of Combat Vet News, right? I was in Ukraine in November. I have a lot of contacts at the front lines. They routinely send me videos of their operations. So if you want to know what the actual cutting edge combat is like, you want to become a member. Plus, this is the best way to support the channel. It keeps me independent. Literally, almost 100% of your membership goes to support me and the team. That's why we host it ourselves. It's not a Patreon. It's nothing like that. But even more important is that this gives you access to the archive of combat videos going back to the start of the war, which is important because it really lets us orient in time and tells us, hey, listen, these grenade drops were happening 3 years ago. And so the fact is that if the Ukrainians were still using grenade dropped drones today, the same ones they were using in 2022, we know they would be cooked because we can see the cat and mouse game. We can see how the Russians have evolved their jamming capabilities. Even now there's interdiction drones that exist solely to interdict other drones. It's preposterous, but this is the way to find what is really happening on the battlefield. So the link is going to be in the description. Okay. Let's just give this another little bit of a listen.
That support in different ways. We have an innovation team, which is here right now. But today, they're working with a couple different UAVs. They're using different UAVs, one to actually conduct the operation and others to observe as well as to intercept just in case we have any situations that arise. In addition to that, there's other equipment that they're using as far as how to drop. We're doing live drops right now. We're doing M67 fragmentation grenades. So with those pieces of equipment, the good thing about it is with the innovation team, they've learned how to adapt it, how to actually place them on the UAVs themselves. Really, the purpose of this training is more of innovation. It's to do things that we've not done before.
Yeah. So Army innovation sometimes feels like an oxymoron because it kind of is. And here's the problem is that in the article, one of the things that they actually discuss here is that while they say, yeah, we successfully dropped a grenade, they said that the purpose of these trials was to allow the Army's innovation team to pass the lessons learned to the Army's higher authorities, which means these guys don't even have the authority to bring any kind of weapon system into the force. And this, I think, is illustrative of the fundamental problem. Again, this is someone who has been in a unit that was set up 10 years ago to train Ukraine's armed forces. So these guys have sprawling links with the Ukrainian armed forces. The fact is that they cannot simply, they could literally, there's nothing stopping them from purchasing Ukrainian drones, having one Ukrainian instructor come and teach their innovation team how these drones work and how to fly them and how to execute them. And the problem is that the individual soldiers almost certainly could see this as an easy solution, right? The problem is that Army bureaucracy is absolutely stifling them and making this comically slow. Because again, this is some people who are just going to go, well, it took us 3 years to do this, and we're going to tell Hire what lessons we learned about it. And Hire's going to go, these are great lessons, guys. and then nothing's going to happen. And this is just a trope, right? For example, my when my brother, who is an engineer officer, went through one of his career courses, one of the guys he worked with, he met there, was a super high performing officer, served in Ranger Regiment, served in the 173rd. And then the Army said, listen, we are going to send you to train at these elite universities, at some elite corporations like Fortune 500 companies. And you're going to go, listen, learn how they train and educate their leadership, and then bring those lessons back to the Army. And this guy said, incredible. This is really going to transform the way the Army does things. So he spends 2 years. He's out with Fortune 500 companies. He's talking to some of the best researchers in academia. He comes back to the Army. He says, listen, here is everything I learned. You guys spent all this time and money. You invested in me to learn about the ways that these elite institutions produce their innovators, their leaders, guys who are transforming their organizations. And here's all the lessons. And the Army said, wow, thanks for this. And nothing changed at all. No curriculum changes, no plan to implement any differences. And this is sort of the problem, is that these kind of do nothing performative innovation is all you can get away with when everything is tightly controlled by the Army's higher authorities. So the Army in paper will often say things like, oh, we empower junior leaders, but those junior leaders are not empowered, right? Because if they were, then they would be able to conduct tactical innovations, even if it meant risking some level of danger, right? But the problem is that, well, why wouldn't they be able to go to Ukraine and buy Ukrainian drone? Well, the U.S. Army and its laws say, the U.S. Army bureaucracy says, listen, you can't use funds to purchase an unauthorized part from an unauthorized dealer. You absolutely can. But the Army says, yeah, you can, but the authority to approve the purchase of a foreign system is 6 levels up in the Pentagon. So you got to run it all the way up through that chain of command. So you got to have 3 different colonels sign off on it. And each one of those colonels can have a bunch of questions for you about who your source is, what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're going to do it, or how you're going to make sure that it's safe. What if it's not safe? What if a soldier gets hurt? What's your plan, right? Then you're going to come back down. You're going to say, okay, we got approval to buy the drone from Ukraine. They say, okay, well, you're going to have an instructor. Yeah. Okay. So now you have to go all the way up to personnel, and they're going to ask you, well, okay, how do you know the instructor's really certified to do what they say they're going to do? How do you know that they aren't like a foreign spy or something? How do you know that they aren't going to steal U.S. technology and sell it to the Russians or Chinese, right? There's all these things. And so you have to run it all the way up. Oh, and they say, oh, are you going to pay him? Well, what happens if he gets hurt? Well, have you told the person's embassy? Have you told our embassy contacts? Right? So now you have to see how each one of those things, each one of the answer to those simple questions that should be a common sense, right? That a company grade officer should be able to common sense their way to answering those questions. But in the Pentagon, each one of those questions requires a question answered all the way up to probably the highest levels, right? Probably some officer at the Pentagon, probably a general officer level person at the Pentagon or at the State Department, is going to have to approve each one of those questions, right? All the way up to Pentagon counterintelligence is going to go, okay, we checked this guy and we officially certified this Ukrainian drone pilot can do it, right? Then someone else has to go all the way, layer after layer, all the way up to the Pentagon. Is going to say, yes, we have coordinated with the embassy and they say it's okay for him to spend an afternoon showing you how to drop a drone. And then you have to go all the way up to say, yes, we have approved funds. He is allowed to get $100 for his time, and he is allowed to eat 2 meals at the Army DFAC. Literally, those are Pentagon level approvals. And what you end up with, you cannot transform in contact if you need Pentagon level approval for the most routine of things. Okay. And the fact is that until officers at the major and lieutenant colonel level are empowered, fully empowered to run their units, to assume risk. And that means that if they're aggressively training with drones, that means sometimes they're going to blow up a drone in a training area. And somebody's going to be, and like they're if you work for Google, right? And Google says, listen, I want you guys, look at Amazon. Here's a great example. Amazon, Jeff Bezos sat down maybe 10 years ago, said, listen, I think we can get into the phone business. I want you guys to build a phone. I want you guys to launch it. We're going to market it. We're going to advertise it. We're going to try to get people to come in to the Amazon ecosystem through a phone. So they did. They came up with this Amazon Fire. They advertised it. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars on this phone. And it was a flop. Nobody adopted it. Nobody felt like Amazon was someone they could trust with their phone. They liked their existing phone. They didn't want to switch operating systems. It was a total disaster. And you know what Jeff Bezos said? Did he fire everybody? Did he court-martial them? Did he can them and order them out of his company forever? No. He said, guys, you guys really made a big swing. You tried your best. That was a great phone. The market said, not today. Okay, good work. Now let's focus on the next one. What's our next big swing? That's it. That is the difference. That is the number one difference between successful, innovative American companies, which in the last 20 years have produced unbelievable technologies. Literally, American private industry has built, look at AI. There's 6 different free AI apps. Okay. In the same 20 years, the American defense industry has purchased a Chinese drone and figured out how to drop a grenade from it. Something that the Ukrainians, people they talk to every day for 10 years, have been doing for the last 3. Okay. And in the course, the same course of 20 years, we've also lost 2 wars, one of which to a government in the poorest nation on earth. So again, what should be happening to Transform and Contact is something that the Pentagon simply cannot stomach. And it's one of the secret sauces in the Ukrainians, where they say individual units have massive power to run their units as they see fit and train their units and even equip their units as they see fit.
To extend ourselves beyond what we're currently capable to do.
My role downrange was the rigger, so I would attach the grenade to the drone dropping system.
This is also the hottest take I've ever seen. He says, my role was to attach the grenade to the dropping system. Now,
what that entails is making sure the dropper is functional and then making sure the grenade is secured on there with the pin in the correct position, removing the safety clip, and making sure it's secured. It went really well. We had a successful drop, the first successful live drop in GTA, and it was a great success.
Also, by the way, guys, if you're like, man, that audio was really hard to get like the words, to hear the words over the music, that's not an accident. That's not your audio. That's how it sounded for me too. These guys, I mean, U.S. Army Public Affairs is some of the most amateurish people I've ever seen, actually. Yeah, they're literally some of the worst. The only ones that are any good are sometimes some reserve units have public affairs officers who are also like chief marketing officers and stuff for their companies, and they happen to bring that expertise. But it's like an accident. Truly, the Army has some of the worst public affairs officers we've ever seen, obviously, because they just outed their cutting edge technology as being embarrassingly dumb. In fact, here's what I want to point out. There's some takes. There's some really just truly great takes. And Kiev Post quoting a couple of people here. I just want to share with you some of the internet's takes on this one. OSIN Technical said, it's a bit concerning that the U.S. took over 3 years to begin deploying a tactic that Ukrainian soldiers were doing just a few days after Russia invaded. The drone dropping the grenade cost about $15,000. Also, no one drops loose M67s anymore. Most Ukrainian units are using a variety of custom adapted munitions like VOG grenades with stabilizing fins. That's what we've talked about. That's what we see dropped now. Another one said, LOL. Why haven't I watched it? I haven't watched a single drone video from the Ukraine war in almost 3 years. Show me a drone dropping, gasp, a grenade. And of course, one other part, this at Aviation Intel actually posted an article from 2016 showing an ISIS drone dropping a grenade into the hatch of an M1 tank in Iraq. So literally 10 years ago, ISIS, a non-state entity, was rolling these out. And this is the actual newsletter. This is the clip of the video here. And as you can see, even the ISIS grenade was clearly retrofitted. It had stabilizing fins and a weighted warhead in the center. So this is just a sign that 10 years ago, a bunch of insurgents in their backyard were innovating faster and better on a faster innovation cycle than the U.S. freaking military. Absolutely unreal. Real life footage said, I'm glad Hegseth is changing the way we fight, but damn, come on, dude. Again, as we've talked about on this channel, I dunked on the previous administration when they screwed up. I dunk on this administration when they screwed up. And I give credit where credit's due. Hegseth is sitting there going, listen, I don't care about all your bullshit regulations and red tape and why you can't. I don't want to hear why you can't. Ultimately, I want you, the U.S. military, to deliver me modern battlefield weapon systems at a scale that we can fight and win today, right? We got to win today's fight. And I think he's trying to do that. But when the delusional part is that U.S. Army Public Affairs, which, by the way, guys, to release this video, FYI, would have been recorded by Public Affairs. First off, there was a pre-approved Public Affairs plan to record this training that had to be approved up at least 3 levels, probably 4. Then the Public Affairs officer was allowed to attend. Then he was able to take this video, shoot it all, edit it, but then he had to send it up the chain of command. The fact that it was branded U.S. Army Public Affairs and not, say, Public Affairs, Ukraine Joint Multinational Training, whatever, means that it went up at least up to, again, the Pentagon level, was edited by them. Then the final product was approved by had to get approved by Public Affairs, had to get approved by messaging, had to get approved by some kind of operational security entity, and then finally was authorized for release on the U.S. Army's Twitter account. Just for context of how bureaucratically nightmarish this is, right? And another Twitter user said, all those millions just for some Ukrainian guy to make it cheaper and better in a foxhole in the front. Literally, they could have watched Sivdiv's videos, guys. Sivdiv, literally, they could have just called him. They could have called a fucking dude, right? Next week's video, have you seen a breech reloading rifle? And no doubt they paid billions to some defense company to make this happen instead of popping down to Home Depot or whatever, right? And of course, the Army got bullied out of keeping it up. They actually ended up deleting it. Oh no, we bullied the cyber army into the U.S. Army into deleting it. Should I feel bad? I kind of do. You should not feel bad because you cannot bully an institution. Okay. Maybe another institution can bully an institution, but you can't really, not an institution the size of the U.S. Army. Okay. They cannot be bullied. They are being criticized, which is a First Amendment protected activity, FYI. I know it's easy to forget that when the White House is willing to sue any of their critics, but actually criticizing the administration is a First Amendment protected activity. Criticizing even the U.S. Army, also protected. So it's not bullying, but also sometimes if you don't want to be bullied and you're the Army, don't do things that deserve bullying. Don't do things that warrant bullying. All right, what else can I tell you? Do you want to help the Ukrainians get the good stuff and help Russian soldiers, families get their death benefits? We can help. I've partnered with UAO to help give Ukrainian units the defensive tools they need to win against Russia's fiber optic drones, right? The U.S. Army likely will deploy fiber optic drones sometime in the next century, but the Ukrainians have to deal with them today. And so we are raising funds to help get them the advanced technology they need, at a price, 1/1000th of what the U.S. Army pays. So if you want to contribute, right, we're particularly helping out the 59th Brigade. They've put up some patches and stuff if you donate. But what we are getting them is, first off, long-range fiber optic drones so they can find Russian drone teams. Next, we're getting them red dot sights for their shotguns to turn them into anti-drone weapons. And then, of course, some mobility stuff, particularly ATVs, right? Currently, the units are making 10-kilometer, that's 6-mile walks into positions. And that's a long time for those soldiers to be exposed to these FPV fiber optic drones. So The quads let them stay in under natural foliage, but also move much, much quicker. Right. And of course, we're getting them lots and lots of camo nets. So the link is going to be in the description. Huge thanks to everybody that's donated. Right. Shout out to Christine. Glory to the heroes. Long live a free Ukraine. Shout out to Andrew Stella. Combat Vet News. Salva Ukraine. Hell yeah. And John Mikulski. Greetings from Australia. Hell yeah. Great joy that I hear the first tranche of Australian M1A1s donated to Ukraine. Australia is one of the largest non-NATO supporters of Ukraine. I hope my donation further assists Ukraine defeating Russian aggression. Hell yeah. Awesome, guys. So thanks to everybody that's donated. Okay. So speaking, again, let's contrast what we just saw there, which is a Chinese-made drone rigged to drop a grenade, which is truly one of the takes of all time. And let's contrast it with the current state of the fighting in Russia. So right now, Russia has had a massive, across all Russian oblasts, a huge shutdown of cell phone internet, right? Their 4 and 5G networks. Shutdowns are sweeping Russia. In fact, one Russian blogger in Rostov-on-Don, that's in the southeast portion of Russia, has gotten over 500,000 views with this little quip. He says, how can you say you're from Rostov without saying a single word? He should show 1 bar of cell service, right? He says, quote, he continues, quote, we have internet until 12 o'clock, and recently there's no connection at all. No need to be angry. Just get used to it already. Truly some fire lyrics there. But more importantly, this reflects a reality by a lot of Russians. And remember, they use cell phone internet for things like all of their tap to pay services, like paying for groceries, right? Or even the actual, the card readers that you tap to pay. Right? They can't use their mapping software like their Google Maps or their Russian equivalent doesn't work. And all over Russia's military district, you're seeing these cell phone shutdowns. And this is in dozens and dozens of Russian regions, from Siberia and even the Far East. There's even some Wi-Fi outages that have been reported, right? Their Russian Uber equivalent not working, ATMs not being able to dispense cash. This is a huge issue for the day-to-day lives of Russians. And the reason is because of the Ukrainian strike against those Russian air bases. One of the things those drones used was actually the Russian cell phone network. And so those drones were actually communicating. They had essentially cell phones, Russian cell phones in them. And that was the signal feed that those drone operators used. So they literally were just calling up their drones and saying, hey, go blow up these here planes. And what's fascinating is that this is the fact that the Ukrainians were able to piggyback off the Russian cell network to deploy their own weapons deep inside Russia means that basically every cell phone within the Russian space is now a potential drone that the Russians haven't discovered yet. This is a huge issue for them. And the Russians, again, are stuck having to resort to the only counter they can think of, which is to shut down everyone's cell phones. But this is an example of, I think, increasingly the core part of the Ukrainian strategy, which is to bring the war home to Russians, right? And because as we've talked about, one of the reasons Vladimir Putin is able to persist in his war, right? He doesn't need to win an election. He is an autocrat. But even autocrats depend on a certain level of support within their population, right? And more importantly, support within their oligarchs. And so the worse and more difficult an oligarch's life gets, the more he is going to support efforts to curtail or oust Vladimir Putin. And that, I think, is the core aspect here. Because remember, this isn't just about Ubers and ride apps. When you shut down the internet, you shut down a large portion of economic activity. What if you're a Russian oligarch who owns all those grocery stores that suddenly for 8 to 12 hours a day, no one can pay? Well, that's actually a tremendous hit to your bottom line. And this compounds even further the falling Russian economic activity. And so what you have is what the Ukrainians are going for is creating a sort of downward spiral for the Russian economy, in which the key things that facilitate transactions become much more difficult. Russians are increasingly unemployed. And you have this environment where the average Russian oligarch is seeing their personal wealth and their personal material success diminish tremendously. And that's one of the reasons why you're seeing Putin, because he has less carrots. His carrots are getting smaller and weaker. So he has to rely more and more on sticks. It's why you're seeing more and more oligarchs getting arrested, getting detained, getting sentenced for corruption. It's because Putin knows that as the carrot, as there's less and less carrot to go around, he has to rely more on bigger and bigger sticks to coerce those oligarchs to continue to support the war. But Vladimir Putin is one 72-year-old man. He is extremely unlikely to be able to contain and control oligarchs, those power brokers within Russian society, sufficiently using just sticks, right? Particularly given the fact that those oligarchs have already suffered significantly. Suffered. Let's use it in quotes here, guys. There's a limit to how much you can really make a billionaire suffer. But remember, the average Russian oligarch is going to have the emotional maturity of Elon Musk. So, for Elon, losing a few $1 billion or getting exposed as not actually being the top rated Path of Exile player on planet Earth, those are deeply personal affronts. They are as painful to him as, as something that actually matters would be to you and I. So again, it may not take that much to get the oligarchs to sort of turn on Putin. Anyway, guys, thank you to all of the Colonel tier members of Combat Vet News: Tom Anderson, Dan Cochran, Jalen Gutt, Officer Murley, Deborah Oppenheimer, Paul JW, Jeff Davies, Mike 54, Stream Margaret, the GMAT Club, all of our Lieutenant tier members. I could not do this without you guys. I appreciate you all so much. Hit that subscribe button, by the way, and join me over on Combat Vet News. New video drops today. See ya. Cheers.